Welcome to Unmasking Social, where we talk about building real friendships and meaningful connections without masking who we truly are. I'm your host, Sharon Baum, a speech and language pathologist with an expertise in social thinking and how it relates to autism and ADHD, specifically with our teens and tweens. Let's dive in. We have so many innovative speech and language pathologists that are trying to support social communication through various social supports. Today, we have a speech and language pathologist who has developed a wonderful visual support, and she will speak about how this lends itself to individualized, strengths-based approach to support all our students, whether they're autistic teens and tweens, struggling to fit in and figure out social, or even neurotypical individuals who need social boost. This episode will allow us to understand social through an extra support. All right, here we are back at Unmasking Social. I'm Sharon Baum, and I have a great guest on today. Her name is Mara, and her is the founder and program director of IRL Social Skills, working for 15 plus years as an autism specialist and speech-language pathologist. She recognized that students and families needed much more support than schools and private one-on-one mental health therapy could provide. Tired of seeing these amazing humans being shunned, excluded, and ostracized because of their neurotype, in March 2021, during the height of a global pandemic and recession, she assembled an interdisciplinary team to serve families of socially struggling teens and young adults from across the United States. She serves on the Oregon Autism Commission, a member appointed by former Governor Kate Brown, and has been a student teacher of yoga and mindfulness for 30 plus years. I'm so happy to have you on the podcast, Mara. We have so much in common.
That's so awesome. Thanks, Sharon.
Yes, a fellow SLP. It's always great. And as a fellow SLP, I always love to think about what led us to this path where we are right now. If it's okay, can we go back to your childhood in terms of what that was like, how you felt in terms of fitting in? What were some challenges or maybe even some great moments that you experienced?
Yeah. So I grew up in the western suburbs of Chicago, and I was, really precocious, early, a hyperlaxile, early and very verbose talker. My mother said that I spoke in this low voice, and I was 15 months old speaking in complete sentences, and people were looking around for a woman. But I was a little, like a toddler, really.
Yeah.
And then I didn't have preschool. I have a twin brother and a brother who's just 15 months younger. Then I had a bunch of cousins. And so when school started, kindergarten, I remember I asked my mom, how do you make friends? What do you do? And she said, well, if you see another little girl, you can just, tell her that you like her dress or that she has pretty hair and just, give a compliment. And then you can start talking to her. And I reported that I did what she told me, and the little girl spit in my face.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So that was my first little foray into, getting direct, explicit instruction in social skills and having it blow up on me. But I don't remember that.
So your first experience with social interaction was being spit at on your face.
Yeah.
So, if that were me and I was having trouble with social interaction at that age, such a pivotal age where you're trying to make friends, you were seeking friends, I would not want to maybe try that again. Did that hinder you from interacting more, or did it just blow over?
That just blew over, but I ended up being in my own reading group by myself. I was so advanced. Mm-hmm. And then I just didn't have a lot in common with other students my age. And I was really I told myself, I was like, well, Mara, if you're not going to be pretty, then you better be smart. And so I worked really hard on being really smart. And that, I know.
That just breaks my heart because as women, I feel like, we're just so hard on ourselves. And I've seen so many girls, worked with so many girls who go through this and are trying to build up their confidence. And it's either beauty or brains. They don't know which one. If they're beautiful, they feel like they're not smart enough. If they're smart, they feel like they're not beautiful enough. And everyone around them is just not supporting them enough, I feel like. And that's what I've observed. I don't know if you've had the same observations with other girls.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially once they get into adolescence.
Yes. And that's something that we're going to talk about a lot today. Mm-hmm. The teens and tweens. That is so hard. So it sounds like you were twice exceptional, what we would label twice exceptional, formerly known as gifted and talented. Some people still call it gifted and talented. And what people don't realize, fun fact about this, which is also a hard fact, is that being twice exceptional might seem to some as, oh, wow, she's so smart. She's excelling at everything. She's doing so well. What a smart girl. However, there are other layers involved in being twice exceptional, which require layers of support. As a speech language pathologist, I've offered support to these twice exceptional students. So it sounds like you were doing your own thing. Were you getting any support services, or anyone helping you navigate this?
Yeah, I was in TAG, talented and gifted program, but I was also in special education math. Mm-hmm. So the really spiky profile that, sometimes comes along with being twice exceptional.
Right.
I had that kind of support, but, twice exceptional kids are hard to educate. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I really had to learn from my mistakes, like, wearing a sandwich board that said walking dictionary on it was probably not the best, so it wasn't the most socially skillful thing to do because, people are like, who do you think you are?
As adults now, we could find it funny.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But as a teen and tween, not so much.
Yeah. that was like third grade. So.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah. You were clever at a young age.
And yeah, in terms of support, social support, hard to come by, right? People, it's like, how do you teach somebody how to make and keep friends? How do you teach, a fish to swim? Well, you have to move your tail and you have to move your fins and remember to breathe however you breathe. And sometimes people just don't know how to give that direct, explicit instruction in an effective manner that can hit home.
Yeah. And it sounds like your mom was trying to help you, but didn't really know how, because as we know, as both of us specialize in teens and tweens with this social communication barrier, and we know that giving explicit direct instruction can backfire often because telling somebody to do this, oh, by the way, do this and make a friend, that scripted language of go there and do this is not the way we now know that people learn. And that's, in my second years in SLP, that's how I learned from the social thinking curriculum via Michelle Garcia Winner, how we have to use the power of observation and let our children and teens and tweens kind of unlearn through observation rather than telling them, this is what you do. Because otherwise it's a scripted kind of social recipe that doesn't work and hasn't worked for the teens and tweens. So if I go circle back to you being an SLP, I don't want to make any assumptions about what led you into this sphere that you're in right now. It sounds like you have experience just living and breathing it as a twice exceptional student, struggling to fit in and not knowing how to access social. So what motivated you to then become an SLP and then later on specialize in individuals with autism, and not just autism, just neurodiverse in general, struggling with social?
Well, I was, raised, my grandmother, she just said, communication is the key to life. She was born and raised in Hell's Kitchen. And yep.
Upper East Side here.
Yep. So there was always that influence around, like communication being just of critical importance. And then I became an SLP because my father had a traumatic brain injury, a right frontotemporal parietal lobe injury, which was deemed unrehabilitatable. And I was like, well, we'll just see about that, because I wanted to help. And
you were really smart, so they couldn't pull that one over you.
No, yeah. And then I just was in the grad school clinic, and I got assigned to an autistic child, and I was like, this is really interesting, and I just got really curious. And then I just got really single-pointedly focused on autism and started the first autism conference at Portland State University here in Portland, Oregon. And then I just continued on that path because I just was attracted to it. And then I see that, my twin brother has ADHD. My younger brother has ADHD. I am probably ADHD, but I don't have that assessment, but it stands to reason, right? And because there's a strong genetic component in this, in our diversity. And then I started noticing that when I was on the autism eval teams, working, in different districts, as well as with birth to 3 migrant family population on the Navajo reservation, I started just noticing patterns, and especially in the girls. And girls, were typically undiagnosed and misdiagnosed. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. That's familiar to me. She looks like me. I was like that. And yeah. Well, that's how I got into autism.
Wow. That's a very fascinating path. And it sounds like it was also a difficult path because your dad had been diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury. And that is something that is very, very difficult to watch. But then you also found power in that and resilience because you were able to then study it and say, hey, we actually can rehabilitate this. This is not something that is not, there's no cure, but we can work on his skills, right? And so that's great. I mean, that's interesting on how you took that path. And you mentioned something about actually being on a Navajo reservation and watching these girls struggle. And I know you're in Oregon, there are these reservations. For us on the East Coast, New York City, right? Some of us don't even know about these Navajo reservations. What was that experience like?
Yeah, the Navajo reservation, and I was noticing the girls that I was assessing in different districts in Oregon, California, Washington, and as well as on the Navajo reservation, which takes up parts of Arizona, Utah, and New Mexico. It's the biggest reservation in the country, and it's the Navajo Nation. And you just notice the ones who are by themselves. You notice the ones who are, they're eating lunch by themselves. They're at recess and they're running their fingers along the chain link fence, of the playground. They're trying to make overtures to other peers and they are getting rejected. Whatever they're doing is not working. They start to just glom on to teachers, right? Because teachers are, more kind and we're adults. And just to clarify, part of the rehabilitation around a traumatic brain injury involves training environments. And so that is something that is also the same as autism, is you don't just focus on the individual themselves. You have to train environments. You have to train parents. You have to train teachers. You have to train school staffs to help facilitate communication and conversation, between and amongst peers.
Yeah. And you mentioned traumatic brain injury as also trying to make that person social again in a way that is their way of social and that allows them to be social in a productive way, just like autism. And that kind of makes me think about how you were involved also closely with someone with aphasia. And aphasia, for those who are listening who aren't familiar, is typically a loss of language that and overall communication that occurs after a stroke. And it can involve different parts of the brain and can manifest differently. And so how did that impact you in terms of either the way that you worked with that individual or how it may be linked to how you work with individuals with autism, access their communication? It's all about the communication, right?
It is. And that's such a great question. So about 10 years ago, I came home from work and found that my partner had a stroke. Oh, and yep. And, he couldn't coordinate breath and voice to make a single sound. And, he was like a very smart person, really accomplished musician, like life of the party, funny guy. And and then, couldn't talk. And that is something in my specialty when I was working in the schools was with non-speaking autistic students, getting them a functional way to express themselves. And I was really good at that. And it was there, it used to be thought that like a non-speaking autistic person was intellectually disabled. Mm-hmm. And now we find that is really like not the majority of cases. The majority of cases that they're really smart. And there's that apraxia, right? Which is different from aphasia. Apraxia means like loss of the fine motor movement of speech, your lips, your teeth, your tongue, your what are called your articulators, and how they are connected to your brain and able to get things out of from your brain, what you're thinking, to get it to come out of your mouth, how you want to say it. Aphasia can be more of the like loss of language, not the motor movements. And they can often co-occur. You can have a stroke, you can have aphasia and apraxia. But it was really enlightening to see that, oh yeah, look, this is a person that I knew before he had a stroke, and I knew his intelligence and I knew his capabilities. And then he couldn't talk. And then to just see how the prejudice, the automatic prejudice that comes, against a person who can't speak, they, are disregarded as, one who can't think, plan, and make decisions or dream. And, if I put a piece of duct tape over anyone's mouth, could they still think, plan, and make decisions and dream, have opinions? Yes, they could. They could still have those things. They just wouldn't be able to express them.
They would think in their minds, oh my gosh, I won't be able to do this. But in reality, they can. And you're right about the prejudice, because it's not just towards the aphasia and the autism population, but circling back to the girls specifically, I feel like there's a very strong prejudice towards the girls that I've observed in terms of them being misdiagnosed because of the expectation of what a girl is supposed to do, what social looks like. And also the girl is trying to fit in. And I've observed so many girls looking like they're making friends. And meanwhile, they're becoming friends with the wrong kids because they don't understand that socially, it's not that they want to be friends. Some people want to be friends with the cool kids. I mean, I was never one of those cool kids, but, and it sounds like you weren't either. We have that in common, right? We weren't the cool bunch, but with the girls, it looks like, oh, wow, look, they're gravitating. They have these cool friends, right? And meanwhile, these kids are in many cases taking advantage of them. I just remember even one girl that I worked with where I found out that every day she was giving away her lunch to a girl that was her friend. And so often I see girls in the schools who don't have a diagnosis yet. And it's not because their parents are against it, which could be, but it's more people are just not seeing it. They're just masking, as you had said that you were masking too. They're just doing everything they can to show that they're neurotypical. And so with that passion, with that heart for the girls, with that heart for helping not one, but two people in your life, like that's crazy. Like the idea that you were able to use all your skills to help your partner with aphasia, to help your father with the traumatic brain injury, using what you knew already, it speaks volumes and probably contributed, I'm guessing, to the path that you took in continuing to help. So what did that path look like in developing some of these amazing programs that are just helping people every day?
Yeah, well, that path looked like me working at the middle school level and noticing the shift, the developmental shift that happens when we are in elementary school, preschool, elementary school. Our relationships are more based in play, right? But then we get to middle school and something changes and our relationships are more based in conversation. And the intervention that we have given as SLPs is to help facilitate play. And then another thing that shifts at the middle school level is the IEP minutes go down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like services decrease, but social demands increase, right? I mean, middle school is ground zero for social skills.
Yeah.
And I was that person in the schools. I was like, 120 minutes a month on an IEP is supposed to go down to 90 minutes. How about 360 minutes a month? How about we change the model? How about I have a homeroom where I see all of these kids who have social communication, social interaction, executive functioning goals on my caseload every single day. I see them every single day. And
5 days a week.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that was what made the difference in their acquisition of these skills. And it wasn't just me like working SLP magic like we do. It was them having a community and being with, a group of kids, of other peers with whom they shared common interests, with whom they could start to forge friendships. You think of like the old show Freaks and Geeks, right? That they need to be with their people and not where they fit in, right? Where they're like, oh, I'm going to put on my best normal to fit in, but where they belong.
Belonging, inclusivity, these are all words that people use and they've become buzzwords, but it seems like you're coming from such a genuine perspective and using that, where you belong. And everybody wants to find their people in life. We all want to find our people. And I even have a student who's now in 12th grade who said the other day that it took him until 9th grade to find his people, to find his group. And some people are not even that lucky. And once he found that group, school was more exciting for him. And so how did you advocate to get that done? Because in you refer to the IEP, which for those who don't know, who are listening, it's an individualized education plan. So a student who's getting a special support, whether it be a special class or a service such as speech or occupational therapy, they're mandated on their IEP. It's basically divided into 3, and it's how they're doing. And based on how they're doing, what goals are required to support them. And then also their supports, whether it be the class type or services, and how many minutes they get. And as Mara pointed out, as school goes on, the minutes decrease. And typically districts are not happy when you increase. So Mara, what were you doing? Like that you were able to double the minutes or actually even triple in some cases. What did you tell us your secret?
Well, I just was a very progressive SLP, and I said, we want to do things that work, right? We don't just be like, well, I served them, like you want to do things that work because there's a lot of downstream impact. This is workforce development because 90% of your day is social skills, right?
Yep.
So and autism is a complex developmental disability that uses resources from school, from healthcare, from social services. It's expensive. And if you treat the social skills, and you teach them how to connect with others and these skills, they get more sophisticated and more refined as we get older. You're like learning how to network at a job fair. Like that's a really high social skill. And, to be frank, like districts didn't really like me. Because
they normally don't like people who advocate for more.
Yeah. So I'd be like, of course my colleagues thought I was great. My parents thought I was great. Admin didn't think I was great. And so I would go to a different school district and, do my thing. And then COVID happened and I just was so concerned about, all of us were impacted by COVID, all of our social skills, all of our social emotional skills, all of our mental health. was affected during COVID. That was like a very hard, like abrupt stop. I mean, a lot of trauma in New York City. I mean, and then knowing that there were already people who were in a deficit, right? They were already socially impoverished, if you will. And then this just caused, a cascading effect. And I just couldn't stand it anymore, frankly, which is why I started IRL social skills, because I was like, they need a lot more than they're getting. And, this intervention saves lives.
You mentioned New York City, you mentioned COVID-19, you mentioned mental health. I relate to every single one. You mentioned socially impoverished. I was actually working in a middle school, which here in New York City, I don't know if you refer to it in Oregon, in the great state of Oregon in the same way, but we refer to it as Title I school. So that means that I believe more than half of the students are below the poverty line. And then we were thrown into COVID. And I remember just how traumatic it was because of the shelter in and some of these kids in environments where they could barely move around. And on top of that, they really didn't have many outlets. And then it was us SLPs I found that really were trying to assist them. And so how did you navigate that mental health piece? I know that you're a big supporter of mental health in the sense that you not only advocate for it, but actually do use it in your practice. So how were you able to support your students at that time?
Well, I got some mental health professionals on my team. And also, let's not forget that when a person has a communication disorder, they are going to need some counseling. And SLPs got master's level counseling credit. I mean, we know our scope of practice. So we're not mental health professionals, but we know something about it because, as I said, you have a communication disorder. It's really impactful. And really, mental health issues are kind of, par for the course with autism and other neurodivergence. I mean, 1 in 4 women with ADHD will attempt suicide. That's 25%. Yeah. I mean, there's, autistic people are 9 times more likely to unalive themselves than their typically developing peers, with a lifespan of 38 to 54 years, average lifespan, largely due to that unaliving. And yeah, I mean, I was really concerned about that. And my background with yoga and mindfulness and being a student as well as a teacher of those things, I just recognized that people need to feel safe in their own bodies before they can effectively engage socially. Like there's something that has to come first, right? And that's that safety. And when we feel safe, our social engagement system can activate.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times this point is missed, which is that a lot of times people are working with individuals with autism or any type of neurodiversity, or even just any communication challenge, and mental health is overlooked because this is a service I'm providing and this is what we're going to do. And the problem with that very often that I found, which maybe you can relate to, is that you said, like, if someone is experiencing something in their body, bringing in body, mind, and as I always say, mind and body, right? Like a misalignment, how are they going to optimally perform socially? They may not even want to perform socially. I've had students who were called oppositional, but really they were experiencing severe depression. So I'm so glad that you're really honing in on this, because this is a really big deal. And I know we spoke earlier briefly about Oregon. I don't want to throw them under the bus, but is it the 51st state the 51st state that has...
We're 51st in the country for adolescent mental health. So we're dead last, and that includes Puerto Rico. So yeah, there's no place to go but up here in Oregon.
I mean, yeah, and here I'm thinking that New York City is a problem, right? And I don't even realize that there in Oregon, you're experiencing such a crisis because you're not really given the supports. I don't even know how people figure this out in terms of that I know government is complicated. Politics is complicated. I still believe that we have a long way to go in mental health. I don't think we're even touching the surface or scraping the surface. And it seems, I mean, that's just how I feel. But at the same time, your program IRL, which I'd love to hear a little bit more about, has now been recognized by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So you started with these groups. You were able to advocate, get them going for 5 days a week, which how you did it, I still amazing. And then you started realizing how much people needed their people, right? Needed their peers who had shared interests and maybe were neurodivergent too and really understood them. So you went from teaching this IRL/peer intervention, right, to some students over Zoom. Like, it started as a small project. And what was it like? What does it entail for those listening who may benefit from this?
So I went to UCLA in August of 2019 to get certified in the PEERS program, which is the program for the education and enrichment of relational skills. And it is recognized as the only evidence-based social skills program available by the University of North Carolina's National Clearinghouse for Autism Evidence and Practices. And I did that training, and I told Dr. Elizabeth McLoughlin, the creator of the program, I said, you know what, I'm going to make this my business. And she was like, good luck with that. And I was like, okay. And then COVID happened. And then I pulled together a team, and PEERS is an evidence-based parent-mediated intervention. So that means parents also learn the skills, because we know, the apple doesn't fall far oftentimes, right? And also there's could be like a neurotype mismatch, right? You have a non-autistic parent and an autistic child, and the parent's like, just go make friends. It's real easy. You just go up and introduce yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Say hello.
No, it doesn't work. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
And my first cohort, I had people from Hawaii to New York. And we just launched, and then word spread. And it's really become it's really IRL social skills now instead of PEERS, because of what I have added to the program. I've added the interoception skills, how do feelings feel in the body? What do those feelings mean? Why is it important to pay attention to them? It's important for health. It's important for safety, right? And it's fundamental to our relationships with other people as well as with ourselves, right?
Yeah,
and
I could work a little bit on that too, to be honest.
We all could.
Yeah, we all can, yeah.
Sharon, this is an intervention that really anyone can take and benefit from. Anyone can, because look, wave hand, look what's happening socially in our country.
Sometimes I wonder if I'm dreaming, honestly, because there's minute by minute, I don't even know. And it's also sad because, like you said, the interoception piece, which I think gets overlooked, which is how things feel in the body. And people with autism generally can't identify the feeling of anxiety, right? Can't identify that they're feeling angry sometimes. They just can't. And then there's the alexithymia. I'm not going to go into all the different things where they just can't identify the emotion at all, but they can't identify what that feeling means. And so your added work for IRL, which is your business, really sounds like it blends social and that social model of peers working together, but also working in a way where they're constantly checking in with how they're feeling through mindfulness, yoga, and I'm missing some things, I'm sure.
Yeah. With just really paying attention to the physical sensations in their body and really orienting them there. A lot of us are really neck up, right? We got this whole body here that gives us information, and we're not really told. There's so much that is competing for our attention, right?
Yep.
But are we told, drop into your own nervous system, which is your brain and your body? What is that telling you? What is your body telling you? How do you know when you have to go to the bathroom? How do you know when you're hungry? How do you know when you're tired? Your body tells you. Your body speaks in sensation. And your body, all your body wants to do is keep you alive. That's all it wants to do. So the trauma responses, that come as a result might not be the most efficacious for the occasion, because like your life is not in danger. Your life is not in danger at the moment, but your nervous system thinks that, right? And that's a really powerful part of our program. And it's powerful for everyone, but it's especially powerful for the parents.
I love how you mentioned the parents. Thank you for bringing it up again, because I wanted to touch upon that. Parent-led intervention research shows, much of the research shows, I'm not making this up because I think you could back me up on this, but much of it shows that parent-led intervention is the most effective intervention for anybody having any communication challenge. So the fact that parents are included in it is going to be the easiest path for the children to develop this, because are they sitting in with them, or is it just every month or so they check in? Yeah.
No, it is so we meet every week. Right now I'm doing summer sessions, which are twice a week, kind of an accelerated model. And the parents aren't there, but parents are definitely kept in the loop. And I'm keeping office hours to also meet with them, but they have access to all of the materials, the replays. But our typical 16-week program, we start in the same Zoom room that is the teens or young adults and the parents. And the first 15 minutes are targeting those interoception skills, somatic experiencing skills. And then we break out into two separate Zoom rooms. The teens or young adults are with two coaches. The parents are with two coaches. And parents really, learn a lot. They learn a lot about how to help their child succeed socially. They learn a lot about neurodivergence. They learn a lot about the fact that they are not alone, that there are other parents who are experiencing this. And it is lonely for parents. Because if you have a child that is developing atypically, like your college friends, like their kid isn't like that. They're not relating, being able to be in a group of other people who get it, that in and of itself is really healing. And they learn that, oh, you know what? When I'm regulated, it's wild. When I'm regulated, my child is regulated. And they learn that our nervous systems are connected.
It's so wild because it's so true. And it's just, even when you're with friends, when you're regulated, they're regulated. It's contagious, really. But you're right about that lonely feeling, because so many parents have come to me over the years and have said, why is my kid like this, right? Or even comparing them to a sibling. And they try to find other parents, but sometimes it's hard. And you have a virtual platform, which brings people together from all over, right? I'm so curious about this, because this is another layer of that perspective taking and flexibility, because we're dealing with different cultures. Because this country, from Hawaii to Oregon to New York, it's just so many cultural differences. Does that also support these children in understanding each other and working on their perspective taking and flexibility and things like that?
It does. And it does more than that. Because oftentimes, we are just in our own little camps, right? Mm-hmm. We won't have exposure to people from other cultures, other backgrounds, other places. And then you learn that, wow, like we actually are more alike than we are different. And it breaks down those like barriers and those preconceived notions. And not to mention that neurodivergence is a culture. It's a high needs culture.
Yeah.
Yep. And I've had minority white programs. And I'm like, this is so great. I've got a bunch of Puerto Ricans in here, from New York. I've got a Jewish family in here. I've got a Chinese family in here. And it is so cool, because this is really, the great equalizer. Neurodivergence is the great equalizer, because it cuts across every single demographic, rich, poor, Black, white, whatever, any religion, it cuts across everything. And and this is really how we build a better world, right?
Yeah, I'm just thinking that this goes beyond social thinking. This goes beyond social communication. this, as it pertains to neurodiversity, this is really people understanding each other and realizing, wow, we have a lot in common. Like, Mara, you're in Oregon, I'm in New York City. You probably grew up completely differently. I grew up Jewish. I don't know what you grew up as. It doesn't matter. But regardless, we probably had such different upbringings, but here we are having a conversation, and I feel like we have so much in common. And this is the thing, is maybe after they're done with your program, they could go out and teach others how to accept each other.
Yep, exactly. And that just gave me chills. That's what
I'm getting chills too. Yeah.
And I was like, what I want is for them to complete our program and to have better social skills than even their typically developing peers. And this is not a far cry, because, and then, and I tell them, if you have gotten the opportunity to take this class, and it is a class that everybody really needs to take, but because not everybody has taken it, you are going to have better social skills than other people. And that means you can teach these skills to other people.
It really reminds me of even mental health situations where people work so hard on their anxiety or their depression or their OCD or whatever it may be, and they come out with better skills overall that are applicable to every aspect of their life. And sometimes now they're even better at coping with everyday anxiety than the person who never even had anxieties. So this is reminding me of that, of how now they're on a higher social level. That is wild. That is really wild. And so this program is really working out well, it sounds like. And the IRL focusing on the interoception, really that mix of feeling things in your body. And it seems like you've really grown this, because this started off as like a small kind of, as most do, right? And now it seems like you've branched out all across the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I branched out. I have different programs, including, I was getting a lot of calls from older adults being like, I'm not a teen or a young adult, but I'm not very good at these skills. I want to learn these skills. So we wrote a curriculum for
the older adults?
For older adults.
Oh, I thought it was just for children and then a separate one for teens and tweens. I didn't know there was was this new?
Yeah.
The older adult one?
It's been about a year. And so we work with, our specific niche is age 11 and up. And and so broken out into near age peers, 11 to 13, 14 to 15, 16 to 20, 21 to 25.
Critical periods.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. But the older adults, it's so interesting you mentioned that, because it keeps coming up in conversation now, where even people I know in practice or just in general, older adults seem to be seeking out the social more than they've ever have. I think it's all the advocates coming out and really them feeling maybe a shared experience. But this seems like a new phenomenon with the older adults really coming forward and wanting help.
Yeah. I mean, we just, like I said, there is more advocacy. The consciousness is rising. There's, autism has kind of like come out of the closet, if you will.
Yes.
And however, there's some things that are a little bit risky under the current regime and head of the Health and Human Services. Like, maybe you don't want to identify that you're autistic. Maybe you just want to identify that you need certain accommodations in order to do your job effectively, right?
Yeah. I've spoken to people, this is even just over the years, who have been scared to fill that check that I have a disability, because even though it says that you will still get the job, they feel like they won't. So people are still fearful of coming out of the closet on that, because naturally there's no assurance that you will or you won't. So it's scary. It's very scary for them. But it seems like, as scary as it is for them, just in speaking to you, it seems like you really create such a safe space for them where they can really feel their emotions, work through their emotions, and then also really socialize and also have their parents feel safe and supported.
Mm-hmm.
And in so doing, if there's anything, because so many people listening to this are either neurodivergent themselves or family, a parent, educator, what advice would you give? Just remembering yourself as that little girl trying to fit in, wearing that little sandwich. I forgot what it was. You're saying, what did it say on it?
Fucking dictionary.
walking dictionary, right? And it's funny, right? But didn't land maybe as well as you wanted it to. And specifically the girls who are masking right now, that every day just in and out masking. The boys are masking too, but the girls are really much more vulnerable right now. What's some advice that in all of your experience with this as such a specialist and just somebody who's really a firecracker, who really went for it and believed nothing was in your way, nothing, and then you just really went through it to advocate. What advice would you give to them if they're really struggling to fit in and really feel alone? Whether it's the parents, and I'm sure you deal with this all the time, the parents, the vulnerable girls.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the advice that I would give to parents and other educators, people who work in healthcare, is listen, entertain the notion of neurodivergence. This person might be saying or doing something that you think is rude or aberrant in some manner. Just be curious about it and think maybe they're neurodivergent. Also give direct, explicit instruction because, they need it because they don't know. It's really the remarkable thing, having taught this program so many times and teaching to adults using our own curriculum. I'm they really don't know. They really don't know how to effectively, make and keep friends. And also I just encourage, the people who are neurodivergent, who are listening to this to, you want to be strategic. What are you into? What are you good at? Okay. Whatever you're into, whatever you're good at, other people are into it. Other people are good at it. And that is going to be your strategy. That's your entry point, to find people with whom you share common interests. And then you still got to use skills. I mean, everyone's talking about, well, we want community, but you have to build community and it takes work and it is not easy and it's real messy, but it's worth it, and
the risk is worth it. We talk about the risk a lot. It's come a lot, even on this podcast, but in general, that risk of being social and potentially being rejected.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then keep moving forward.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still worth the risk.
It is. It is still worth the risk because, what you are seeking is also seeking you. There are lonely people who are wanting to have a really good friend, and you could be that. And
it starts with one. Yeah. It starts with only one, right?
Yeah. Well, two.
Or two. No, well, yeah, right. One friend, but two people. Yeah, right. I mean, unless you're friends with yourself, which is also good because I'm sure part of your work is finding, the self-love. But you can't have a friendship with yourself is a little different. So that's really, wow. This was really a truly great conversation just because it really breaks down two really important components, which is the social, the community, but also the mental health, the emotional piece that is really so complicated. And the need for the direct, explicit instruction, and the last thing I wanted to add is you mentioned how it's the first thing you mentioned when I asked you what would you say to them is you first spoke to everybody else, the neurotypicals, which is think about why someone might be doing something. That's where it's a neuro-affirming approach because why is that person maybe interrupting and talking over me, for example, right? That happens. We look at the person, think about them as a fellow human, a fellow person, a fellow individual with a shared humanity, right? And think about how you can also include them and adjust according to them. Because I believe, and I don't know if you believe this too, but there are many neurotypicals that are very empathetic and that are curious about the neurodivergent community. And maybe also don't know how to communicate. What would you say to the curious ones? Because I do know a lot of them over the years, adults too, who are very curious and find. I've had people say, "Oh, they're so these neurodivergent people that I've met recently, they're so interesting, right?" Because they are. And so, what would you say to the ones that are, especially the teens and tweens? It's a hard time. Everybody wants to fit in. What would you say to them in terms of that can help alleviate their fear of communicating with the neurodiverse and interacting?
I mean, I would say that, so it's a disability, right? And would you just, if you were going through a door and there was a person behind you in a wheelchair, would you just let the door slam in their face and be like, haha, like, no, you wouldn't.
I hope not.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, really hope not. Yeah.
You hold the door for them and just think about, holding the door for this person, like inviting them. They're alone. We are no good alone. We do not survive alone. If a person is alone, that is, you can intervene there. You can like start a conversation. You can smile at them. You can ask them a question. This is really, really important right now in our culture to smile, to, look at people, to exchange social pleasantries, this like dreaded small talk. It's super important. But small talk is big talk, because right. Especially when you're trying to build a better world, you have to start somewhere, right?
Yeah. Even if it's just, hey, how's the weather today, right?
Yeah.
It's really hot here in New York City, Mara, right?
What I heard. Yeah.
Not right. But that's an example of
mm-hmm.
small talk, right? It really is, by the way. I've been sweating all day. So, but yeah, you're right. No one is good alone. And I think that, the tides are turning a little bit, especially with programs like yours, which brings me to my final part of this episode, which is where can people sign up for your course? And also, where can people find you?
So they can go to my website, irlsocialskills.com. I am on social media. I'm on Instagram at IRL Social Skills. I have a YouTube channel, IRL Social Skills. I'm on LinkedIn, both my personal page, Mara McLoughlin. That's where I, rub virtual elbows with a lot of actually autistic researchers and have that really cool community. And then also IRL Social Skills on LinkedIn. So yeah, those places.
Thanks so much, Mara. See, I said Mara again. Mara, but you understood. It was, communication, a minor communication breakdown. Thank you so much for being on here. I know that people who are listening, whether it's parents or children or teens and tweens, educators can really get a lot of what you spoke to in terms of social and emotional too. And thank you for being so vulnerable about your own journey towards getting to this place.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure being on your podcast.
Pleasure meeting you, Mara.
Likewise.
Have a good afternoon. Thank you.